Throwing your husband out on the street with one suitcase after filing a fake police report, while your new boyfriend starts carving up his business behind his back, sounds like a pretty perfect plan, right? My wife sure thought so. She was already sitting in my living room, drinking my coffee, counting my money, and acting like she'd won the damn lottery. The only problem was, before changing the locks and deciding my house was suddenly hers, she forgot to check one very boring little stack of papers. And guys, that mistake ended up costing her a whole lot more than a marriage. Until about a year before all this crap started, my life was honestly pretty normal. I had a business I'd spent years building, a decent house, a wife I'd been married to long enough that I thought I knew every version of her face, and enough money coming in that I wasn't checking my bank app every time I bought steaks. Nothing crazy. I worked a lot, came home, grilled on weekends, complained about property taxes, changed my own air filters, because apparently that's what happens when you hit middle age. You start getting weirdly proud about buying the right furnace filter at Home Depot. That's basically where I was in life, comfortable, busy, maybe a little too trusting. Okay, definitely too trusting. Then this new guy came into the business. Let's call him Ryan. Early 40s, always dressed a little too nice for a normal workday, perfect teeth, expensive watch, and the kind of handshake where the guy grabs your arm with the other hand like you've both just closed a deal on a private island. You know the type. 5 minutes after meeting you, he's already saying things like, "Brother, we've got huge upside here." Brother? Man, you learned my last name 10 minutes ago, but I'll give him this. He was good with people. Really good. He could sit down with a client who came in pissed off, and 20 minutes later have the guy laughing and ordering lunch for everybody. At first, I liked him. That's the embarrassing part. I thought bringing him in as a partner was one of the smarter things I'd done. He had contacts, energy, big ideas. He kept talking about expansion, new contracts, scaling operations, all that business crap people say when they want you imagining a bigger number in your bank account. And some of his ideas actually worked. Revenue went up. We picked up a couple strong accounts. I started giving him more responsibility because, well, why wouldn't I? The guy looked useful. Then he started coming over to the house. At first, it was completely normal. We'd have dinner, open a couple beers, spread documents across the dining room table, and talk about work. My wife would cook sometimes. Other times we'd order barbecue or Chinese. Ryan was charming with her too. Not flirty. At least not in a way I noticed. Just friendly. He'd compliment the food, ask about her day, make jokes. She liked him. And again, idiot me thought, great. My wife gets along with my business partner. Perfect. One less headache. Pretty soon Ryan was coming over more often, sometimes twice a week. Sometimes he'd show up with a bottle of wine and say, "Figured we could go over those numbers tonight." I'd say, "Sure." My wife would suddenly disappear upstairs and come back 20 minutes later, wearing something nicer than the sweatpants she'd had on all afternoon. Did I notice? Yeah. Did I think anything of it? Nope. Because apparently, my brain had decided to take an extended vacation. Then the little changes started stacking up. New dresses, new perfume, hair appointments all the damn time. She started buying shoes that looked like they were designed by somebody who hated feet, and suddenly, she was very interested in our business. Now, this woman had spent years listening to me talk about work with the same expression people have when somebody explains how drywall is manufactured. But now, she had questions. How's the new contract going? Did Ryan get that client? Are you still thinking about opening another location? At first, I thought she was just trying to be involved. I actually liked it. Then, she started having these little business discussions with Ryan when I wasn't around. He'd text her about dinner plans. She'd tell me, "Ryan, stop by to drop off some paperwork." Or, "We were just talking about the new project." One evening I came home and found them sitting at the kitchen island drinking wine. I looked at Ryan and said, "Man, do you work here now too?" He laughed. "Your wife makes better coffee than the office." My wife said, "We're just talking about the new expansion." I grabbed a beer from the fridge. Great. Somebody explain it to me when you're done. That was me. Standing in my own kitchen while my wife and business partner were apparently holding a meeting I hadn't been invited to, and I was making jokes about it. If there were an award for ignoring obvious crap, I would have had a trophy on the mantel. Over the next few months, the two of them got even closer. Nothing I could point to. Nothing obvious, just little things. She'd laugh harder at his jokes than she used to. He knew things about our schedule I didn't remember telling him. Sometimes I'd call him about work, and he'd say, "Yeah, your wife mentioned that." And I'd think, huh. Then immediately move on, because I trusted both of them. That's really what it came down to. I wasn't checking phones, wasn't following anybody, wasn't sitting in the driveway at midnight trying to catch somebody. I had a company to run. I figured grown adults who said they cared about me probably weren't quietly planning to screw me from both directions. Turns out that was a little optimistic. The night everything blew up, I left the office later than usual. It had been one of those stupid days where every 5-minute problem somehow turns into an hour. Supplier issue, angry customer, employee called in sick. Printer decided it no longer believed in electricity. By the time I got home, all I wanted was a cold beer, leftovers, and maybe 40 minutes of television before falling asleep on the couch. Then I turned onto my street and saw the lights. 2 police cars sitting outside my house, blue and red flashing across my driveway. I slowed down. My first thought was that something had happened to my wife. I parked crooked, jumped out and walked toward the house. One officer met me near the front steps. "Sir, are you Daniel?" "Yeah, what's going on? Is my wife okay?" He looked at me in that careful cop way where you immediately know this conversation is not going where you want it to. "She's inside. We need to speak with you before you enter." I looked past him through the front window, and there she was, sitting on my couch, crying, or at least doing a pretty decent impression of crying, and sitting right beside her with one hand on her shoulder like some supportive little husband. Ryan, my business partner. I looked at the cop, then back through the window, then at the cop again. And all I could manage was, what the hell is he doing in my house? The officer didn't answer that question. He just said, "Sir, I need you to stay calm." And guys, whenever a cop tells you to stay calm before you've even done anything, that's usually a pretty good sign your evening is about to go straight down the toilet. I said, "I am calm. I'm asking why my business partner is sitting on my couch with his hand on my wife." The second officer came outside carrying some papers. "Mr. Carter, we've been served with a temporary protective order." I stared at him. "A what?" He handed me the papers. I started reading, and for the first 30 seconds, I honestly thought there had been some kind of mistake. My wife's name was there. My name was there. Our address was there. Then I got to the accusations: abuse, threatening behavior, psychological intimidation, controlling finances, creating fear inside the home. I looked up. "What the hell is this?" The officer said, "These allegations were presented to the court." Allegations? None of this happened. He kept his voice calm. "I'm not here to decide that tonight." I pointed through the window. "Ask her. I've never laid a hand on that woman in my life." Then I saw Ryan looking at me from inside, and suddenly something clicked. Not everything, but enough. I said, "He helped her do this." The officer immediately went, "Sir, don't approach anyone." "I'm not approaching anybody. I'm standing on my own damn porch. Right now, legally, you cannot enter the residence." That sentence hit me harder than anything else. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because what else do you do when somebody tells you that you can't walk into the house you've been coming home to for years? I held up the papers. "This is my house. I understand." "No, I don't think you do. My clothes are in there. My medication is in there. My laptop is in there. I paid the damn electric bill this morning." He nodded. "I understand you're upset." "Upset? Man, I'm confused." And I was. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't trying to push past anybody. I just couldn't get my brain around what I was looking at. Then the front door opened. My wife stepped outside. Ryan stayed behind her. She had red eyes, but there wasn't a damn tear on her face anymore. She looked at me for a second, then down at the papers in my hand. I said, "What did you do?" She folded her arms. "You know exactly what you did." "No? Apparently I don't. That's why I'm asking." She looked toward the officers like she wanted to make sure they were watching. Then she said, "I'm not arguing with you anymore." I almost looked around for a camera. "Arguing with me about what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached back inside and grabbed a suitcase. My suitcase. One old black rolling suitcase I'd had for years. She dragged it across the doorway and dropped it near my feet. There, I packed some of your things. I looked down, then back at her. You're serious? Completely. I opened the suitcase right there. Guys, I'm not exaggerating. Underwear, socks, 3 t-shirts, a pair of jeans, my shaving stuff, 1 sweatshirt. That was apparently my share of my own damn life. I looked at her. Where's the rest of my stuff? You can deal with that through the lawyers. Then Ryan finally decided to speak from inside my house. Daniel, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I slowly turned my head toward him. I swear that sentence nearly did more damage to my self-control than the entire court order. I said, you might want to shut your mouth. One officer stepped slightly closer. Sir. I raised both hands. I'm done. Ryan went quiet. Smart move. Then my wife looked at me with this little smile. Not some huge, evil grin like in a movie, just a tiny one. That was worse because that's when I realized she wasn't scared. She was happy. She thought she'd won. She said, it's over, honey. Your time is up. I stared at her. Then she added, this is our home now, and Ryan and I will handle the business. Our home. Ryan and I. There it was. No more pretending. I looked at Ryan standing behind her, comfortable as hell in my living room. Then I looked at the suitcase by my shoes, and suddenly I understood that this wasn't some argument that got out of hand. They'd planned this crap. Maybe not every detail, but enough. The accusations, the paperwork, the timing, Ryan being there, my suitcase already packed. This wasn't something she'd decided that afternoon because she was afraid of me. They'd been getting ready. I asked the officer, so what happens if I walk inside right now? He answered immediately. You could be arrested for violating the order. That was all I needed to hear. I'm not stupid enough to get arrested just to prove I can reach my own refrigerator. I picked up the suitcase. My wife stepped back toward the door. I said, you're really doing this? She looked me straight in the face. Yes, I nodded. Okay. That seemed to confuse her. Maybe she expected begging. Maybe she wanted me yelling in the driveway so she could point at me and say, see? He's crazy. Not happening. I dragged the suitcase toward my truck. Behind me, the front door closed. Then I heard the lock turn. My own damn front door. I stood there for maybe 2 seconds with one hand on the truck handle. One suitcase, that was it. Everything else I owned was behind that door, and those 2 were inside. I drove to a cheap motel off the highway because I didn't know where the hell else to go. I could have called friends, but honestly, I didn't want to explain any of it yet. I wasn't even sure I understood it myself. The room smelled like old carpet and industrial cleaner. There was a little coffee machine on the counter that looked like it had survived 3 wars, and the air conditioner made a noise like somebody had trapped a lawnmower inside the wall. I put the suitcase on the bed, opened it, looked at my 3 shirts and pile of socks, and said, well, buddy, looks like we're doing great. That first night, I barely slept. By 6 in the morning, I was sitting on the edge of the bed drinking motel coffee that tasted like warm ditch water, going through everything in my head, the wife, Ryan, the business, those fake accusations, and one thought kept coming back. They were way too comfortable. Nobody pulls something like that and then just hopes everything works out. They thought they had me. And over the next couple weeks, I found out exactly how much they'd already taken. Those first couple weeks in that motel were absolute crap, guys. There's no nicer way to put it. I went from waking up in my own house making coffee in my own kitchen and driving to a business I'd built over years, to waking up next to a humming mini fridge with one suitcase sitting on the floor. Every morning started the same way. Bad motel coffee, phone, lawyer, more bad coffee, and then another phone call that somehow made the situation worse. Ryan and my wife had moved fast. Really damn fast. While I was still trying to deal with the protective order and figure out how the hell you prove you didn't do things that never happened, Ryan was already messing around inside the company. He'd been preparing for it, and that became obvious pretty quickly. Remember all those little projects I'd trusted him with? All those documents he'd said needed signatures? All those times he'd offered to take some paperwork off my plate? Yeah. Turns out Captain Teamwork had been building himself a nice little path into the operational side of my company. He and my wife started presenting themselves like they were basically running the place. They contacted employees, talked to clients, and started trying to control payments and accounts. Ryan told people I was dealing with serious personal and legal issues and needed to step away temporarily. Temporarily. That's a nice word, isn't it? Sounds much better than, I'm trying to steal this guy's business while sleeping with his wife. My phone started ringing constantly. One employee called and said, "Daniel, what the hell is going on?" I said, "That's an excellent question. Ryan says he's handling operations now." Ryan says a lot of things. "Are you coming in?" "I can't right now." There was a pause. Then he asked, "Is that stuff about you true?" That one hurt. I sat on the edge of that crappy motel bed and looked at the carpet. No? Okay. Just that. Okay. And I remember being weirdly grateful for it, because when somebody puts accusations like that on paper, people look at you differently. Doesn't matter whether they're true. The words are already out there. Meanwhile, my wife was having the time of her damn life. I wasn't stalking her social media. I didn't even want to see it, but people sent me screenshots. Of course they did. Because apparently when your marriage explodes, everybody you know suddenly becomes a volunteer investigative journalist. One friend texted me, "Man, you probably don't want to see this," then immediately sent it. "Thanks, buddy." It was my wife standing in our kitchen with a glass of wine. My kitchen. Behind her was the big stone island we'd spent 3 months picking out during the remodel. The caption said something about new beginnings in my house. Another picture showed her out back by the pool with 2 friends, then another, new dress, big smile, and some crap about finally choosing happiness. And the house, that place was worth around $850,000. Not Beverly Hills money, sure, but it wasn't exactly a garden shed either. And she was already acting like she'd inherited the damn thing from me while I was still alive. One of her friends apparently asked what was happening with the house during the divorce. My wife replied that she was protected and that everything was being handled. She really believed it, and Ryan did too. They thought the protective order got me out. They thought the business paperwork gave Ryan control, and they thought divorce would give my wife her piece of the house. From where they were sitting, I was finished. Business taken, house taken, reputation trashed, and 1 suitcase in a motel. Pretty clean job. There was just one little problem. They got greedy. And greedy people have this funny habit of checking the papers that help them and ignoring the boring ones that don't look important. About 3 weeks into motel life, I was sitting with my attorney, going through everything. Business documents on one side, court papers on the other, bank records, emails, company agreements. It looked like somebody had dumped an entire Staples store across the conference table. My lawyer was going line by line, slow, painfully slow. At one point I said, "If I knew divorce involved this much reading, I would have behaved better in English class." He didn't even look up. "Good paperwork saves people." "Great. Put that on a coffee mug." Then he asked me something. "How is the residence titled?" I said, "The house?" "Yes." I shrugged. "Family property." He looked up. "What does that mean?" And that's when I remembered something I hadn't seriously thought about in years. The house wasn't actually mine, not legally. See, that property had been in my family for decades. My grandfather built the original house around 30 years earlier. Over time, it had been renovated, expanded, updated, all that stuff, but the land and property had been placed into a family trust controlled through my grandmother. That was old family business, boring family business, the kind of paperwork everybody signs and then sticks in a safe because nobody wants to talk about trusts over Thanksgiving turkey. My wife knew the house came from my family. Of course she did, but she apparently assumed that because we'd lived there as husband and wife for years, renovated it and treated it like our home, it had become normal marital property. And honestly, for years, I barely thought about the legal difference either. My lawyer suddenly got very interested. He said, "Do you have the trust documents?" "Not here." "Where are they?" "Copies should be with the family attorney." He leaned back. "Get them." So I did. And guys, that's when this whole miserable story finally gave me one tiny reason to smile. The original property documents were clear, very clear. The house had never been transferred into my wife's name. Hell, it hadn't even been transferred into my personal name the way Ryan and my wife apparently assumed. It remained tied to my grandmother's family trust, with specific protections around divorce, marital claims, and transfer of control. My grandfather had apparently understood one important thing long before I did. People can get stupid around property. So the old man had made sure the paperwork wasn't stupid. My attorney read through the trust terms twice. Then he looked at me and said, "Did your wife ever review these documents?" I thought about it. "No." "Did Ryan?" I laughed. Apparently Ryan was too busy reviewing my wife. That finally got a smile out of him. Then he tapped the papers. They may have a much bigger problem than they realize. For the first time in weeks, that motel room didn't feel quite so permanent. Because while my wife was posting pictures from her new $850,000 lifestyle and Ryan was playing businessman inside my company, neither one of them had bothered to answer one very simple question: who actually owns the damn house? And the answer was simple: not my wife, not Ryan. At that point, technically, not even me in the normal way they thought. The house was still sitting inside my grandmother's family trust. My grandfather had built the place around 30 years earlier, and my grandparents had been very particular about keeping family property inside the family. Back then, I thought all that trust paperwork was old people stuff. You know how it is. Somebody starts talking about estate planning at Thanksgiving, and suddenly every man at the table becomes extremely interested in mashed potatoes. But Grandpa wasn't stupid, and neither was Grandma. They had the property locked down pretty damn tight. The trust documents made it clear that the house wasn't normal marital property. It wasn't something my wife automatically got half of just because she'd lived there with me. There were specific conditions about divorce, ownership, and who could control the property. And there was another important piece. My grandmother had gotten older and couldn't manage this stuff herself anymore. The family attorneys had already been working through the final legal procedures connected to the trust and the authority she'd granted me. That process had started before my wife pulled her little stunt. It just hadn't fully closed yet. My lawyer explained it to me in normal English because after about 10 minutes of legal language, my brain starts making the Windows shutdown noise. He said, "Once this is completed, your individual rights to the property are confirmed under the trust. Your wife has no ownership interest in the house." I said, "None." "None? Not half?" "No." "Not the kitchen?" "No." "The pool?" "No." I leaned back. "What about the fancy wine fridge she insisted we needed?" He looked at me. "The appliance isn't really the important issue here. That's because you didn't pay for the damn thing." But I got the point. The funniest part was that my wife and Ryan had apparently never checked. They just assumed big house, married couple, years living there, therefore divorce equals payday. That's about as deep as their legal research went. And because they thought they'd already pushed me out permanently, they weren't exactly being careful. My wife was still posting pictures from the house. Ryan was staying there constantly. Neighbors saw his car overnight, and packages started arriving in his name. The guy basically moved into a house he had zero legal right to occupy, while also trying to take over the owner's business. You almost have to respect that level of stupidity. Almost. I asked my attorney, "So can I go throw them out today?" He shook his head. "No." Of course, lawyers love ruining the fun part. He reminded me that the protective order was still something I had to respect until it was dealt with properly. He didn't want me anywhere near the house without the correct court paperwork, and he was right. The last thing I needed was to give my wife one real incident after she'd already invented a bunch of fake ones. So I waited. That's what drove me crazy. I knew they were sitting in that house thinking they'd won, and I still had to wake up every morning in that crappy motel. Same noisy air conditioner, same terrible coffee, same little plastic cup wrapped in plastic like it was a medical device. Meanwhile, Ryan was probably drinking my bourbon. That one bothered me more than it should have. I had a nice bottle I'd been saving. One night I actually texted my lawyer, "If that bastard drinks my good bourbon, can we add that to the lawsuit?" He replied, "Go to sleep." Fair. So I waited while the trust process finished. A few more weeks, signatures, certified copies, notices, more documents. If hell has an administrative department, I'm pretty sure it looks exactly like a law office printer. Then, almost 2 months after the night I got tossed out with one suitcase, my attorney called. "Come by the office." I said, "Good call or bad call?" "Good." "How good?" "Just come in." So I drove over. He had a fresh stack of documents on his desk. Seals, signatures, everything official. He slid them toward me. I looked at the first page, then the second, then I looked at him. He smiled. "Well, man, it's done." "What's done?" "Your rights under the trust are fully confirmed. The property is under your sole control pursuant to the family documents." I sat there for a second. "So she has no claim?" "Not to ownership of that house." "And Ryan?" He actually laughed. "Ryan has even less." I leaned back in the chair. For 2 months, those two had been living in an $850,000 house, acting like king and queen, posting pictures, drinking wine, talking about their new life. And legally? They had exactly 0 ownership rights to the place. Nothing. Not a bedroom, not a bathroom, not one damn brick. My lawyer tapped the documents. "Your wife and her boyfriend are currently occupying property they do not own." I smiled. "That's awkward." "Very. Now I know what some people would have done. Drive straight over there, bang on the door, wave the papers in their faces, start yelling, 'Surprise!' Nope, we weren't doing that. My attorney looked at me and said, 'Now we do this properly.' And by that point, I'd learned to love those words. Properly meant no screaming, no stupid revenge stunt, no giving them a chance to twist the story again. Because the house wasn't even their biggest problem anymore. While the trust paperwork had been getting finished, my attorney and the business lawyer had been digging through what Ryan had done inside my company. And guys, that idiot had left fingerprints everywhere. Unauthorized changes, questionable transfers, documents carrying signatures I sure as hell hadn't put there. Attempts to take control of accounts. The deeper they looked, the uglier it got. My lawyer put another folder on the table. I looked at it. "What's that?" He said, "That's where this stops being just an ugly divorce." And suddenly, the house was only one piece of the mess those two had built for themselves. The business folder was ugly. And I don't mean complicated lawyer ugly where you need 3 degrees and a bottle of aspirin to understand it. I mean regular person ugly. There were documents with my name on them that I had never signed, changes to operating authority I had never approved, transfers I didn't recognize, and emails Ryan had sent while presenting himself like he had full control of the company. And the funniest part? The idiot had put half of it in writing. Guys, if you're planning to screw somebody over, maybe don't create a nice little email trail explaining exactly how you screwed them over. Just a thought. My attorney had brought in another lawyer who handled the business side. We sat around a conference table while he went through everything, pointing at one document. "Did you sign this?" "No." Another. "This?" "Nope." "This authorization?" "Never seen it." He looked at me. "Then we have a problem." I said, "Pretty sure Ryan has the problem." He gave me a little smile. "That's becoming increasingly likely." They explained what we were going to do. And no, I wasn't driving to the office and flipping desks over. I wasn't calling Ryan and saying, "You better watch your back." That's exactly the kind of dumb crap that would have helped him. We did it properly. My attorneys filed claims over the suspected fraud, forged documents, and unauthorized takeover of business operations. They also went after the financial activity connected to it. Then we waited for the court. That waiting part sucked, but this time I knew something they didn't. My wife and Ryan were still acting like everything was fine, still living in the house, still trying to run the business, and still spending money. They thought I was sitting in that motel crying into my pillow, which, to be fair, that pillow was terrible enough to cry over. Then the court orders started landing. Once the banks received the orders tied to the disputed transactions and fraud case, access to the accounts under investigation got frozen. Corporate accounts, disputed funds, and the personal accounts tied into the mess were suddenly a whole lot less useful. I found out because my attorney called me early one morning while I was standing next to the motel coffee machine. He said, "Accounts are frozen." I looked at that little machine bubbling out brown water. All of them? The ones covered by the order. So what happens now? Now they find out. And apparently, they found out pretty damn fast. One of my old employees called me later that morning, trying not to laugh. "You're gonna like this." "What?" Ryan came into the office pissed off because his company card got declined. I smiled. "Really?" "Yep, tried it twice. Maybe the machine was broken." "Oh, definitely. I'm sure that's it." Then I heard from another person that my wife had tried using one of the affected cards that morning and got the same beautiful little word, declined. Imagine that. You wake up in an $850,000 house you think you stole. You walk into the kitchen feeling like the Queen of Georgia. Maybe you're planning brunch. Maybe you want a little Starbucks. Then beep, card declined. Try another one. Nope. Call the bank. Frozen. That's a rough morning. I didn't call her, didn't send a laughing emoji, didn't post anything online. I just drank my crappy motel coffee and let the paperwork do its job. My lawyer called again that afternoon. He said, "We're ready to move on the house." Now that got my attention. What does that mean? It means we have the ownership documents, the necessary court order, and the enforcement arranged. I sat up. When? 2 days. Those were the longest 2 days of my life. Not because I was nervous. Okay, maybe a little, but mostly because I kept imagining what condition my house was in. Were they destroying stuff? Had Ryan moved his crap into my closet? Was my good bourbon still alive? Important questions. 2 mornings later, I got up early, showered, put on clean jeans and a button-down shirt. Then I packed my one suitcase. That felt good. For nearly 2 months, that stupid suitcase had been sitting in the corner of the motel room, reminding me how I'd left my own house. Now I zipped it up and put it in the truck, checked out. And when the guy at the front desk said, "Have a good one," I replied, "Planning on it." Then I drove toward home. But this time I wasn't alone. 2 sheriff's vehicles were meeting us near the property with the court order. No drama, no baseball bats, no group of buddies standing around looking tough, just paperwork and people whose job was to enforce it. We stopped a short distance from the house first, and one deputy went over the order with me and my attorney. He said, "You stay back unless we ask you to come forward." Fine by me. We'll handle contact. Even better. Then we drove up. 2 sheriff's vehicles, my truck, and my attorney behind us. We pulled in and blocked the easy way out of the driveway. And there it was. My house. First time I'd been that close in 2 months. Same porch, same windows, same front door where my wife had dropped one suitcase at my feet and told me my time was up. I sat behind the wheel holding a cup of coffee. One of the deputies walked to the front door and knocked. Nothing. Knocked again, then the door opened. My wife stepped outside wearing a robe, looked at the deputy, then looked past him. She saw the sheriff's vehicles, saw my truck and guys. That woman's face changed so fast I almost spilled my coffee. A second later, Ryan appeared behind her in a white undershirt and boxer shorts. Big businessman? Very impressive. My wife pointed toward my truck. "He's not allowed to be here." The deputy calmly held up the court papers. "Ma'am, we're here under a court order concerning this property." She looked confused. "What court order?" He handed her the paperwork. Ryan grabbed it and started reading. I could see his face from the truck. First confused, then worried, then very, very pale. The deputy said something to them. My wife shook her head. Ryan started arguing, and the deputy answered again. Then my wife looked straight at me, and even from across that driveway, I could tell she'd finally understood one very simple thing. This time, the suitcase wasn't mine. I stayed in the truck. That was the plan. No walking up to the porch, no standing there with some stupid grin on my face, no, "How do you like it now?" I had coffee, I had a comfortable seat, and for once I had absolutely nowhere else I needed to be. The deputy was doing all the talking. My wife kept pointing at the papers and then toward me. I couldn't hear every word through the windshield, but I didn't need subtitles to understand the general message. She was pissed. Ryan was worse. He came halfway onto the porch in his boxer shorts and undershirt, waving one hand around like he was giving a speech at City Hall. Then he raised his voice enough that I could hear him. "We live here. You can't just throw us out." The deputy said something calmly, but Ryan fired back. "This is illegal." That one made me smile. Illegal, coming from the guy whose signature collection apparently included mine. Beautiful. My wife disappeared inside for a second, then came back out with her phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling a lawyer, probably calling the court, hell, maybe calling the customer service number on the paperwork. hoping somebody would tell her there had been a terrible misunderstanding. There hadn't. The deputy finally raised his voice just enough for me to hear. "You have 15 minutes to collect essential personal belongings and leave the property." My wife stared at him. 15 minutes? Yes, ma'am. This is my home. No, ma'am. The ownership documents and court order say otherwise. Ryan stepped forward again. She has rights. The second deputy moved closer. "Sir, you've been given lawful instructions." Ryan kept talking. "Big mistake." He pointed toward me. "This is his doing. He's violating the protective order just being here." The deputy looked at the paperwork in his hand, then back at Ryan. "Sir, the legal issues involving Mr. Carter have been reviewed for today's enforcement action. Right now I'm instructing you to collect your belongings." Ryan said, "I'm not going anywhere." The deputy reached toward his belt. Didn't pull anything dramatic, didn't tackle him. He just looked at Ryan and said, "You can leave with your belongings, or we can discuss obstruction and you can leave in handcuffs, your choice." Amazing how quickly a man discovers his love of cooperation when handcuffs enter the conversation. Ryan shut up. My wife started crying, real crying this time, no little courtroom tears. She was standing on the porch in a robe, hair all over the place, staring at the house like somebody had just told her Walmart was repossessing it. Then she looked at me again. I took a sip of coffee. Not gonna lie, guys, that coffee tasted pretty damn good. Much better than the motel crap. The two of them ran inside. And I mean ran. The deputies stayed near the door while they started grabbing whatever they could. A couple minutes later, Ryan came out carrying 2 garbage bags stuffed with clothes. Garbage bags. I had to look away for a second, because 2 months earlier, my wife had given me 1 suitcase with underwear and socks and told me to get lost. Now Mr. Big Business Partner was standing in my driveway in boxer shorts, stuffing his life into a black hefty bag. Life has jokes. Sometimes they're actually pretty good. He threw the bags near the curb and went back inside. My wife came out next carrying a purse, a small suitcase, and an armful of clothes. She shouted toward my truck, "Daniel!" I didn't move. "Daniel, this is insane!" Still didn't move. One deputy told her, "Ma'am, keep collecting your belongings." She yelled, "You can't do this to me." That was interesting. I couldn't do this to her. Apparently kicking me out with 1 suitcase using accusations I said were fake was just normal marital housekeeping, but asking her to leave property she didn't own. Cruelty. Got it. Ryan came out again, this time wearing jeans. Progress. Still no shoes. He had another garbage bag and what looked like a laptop bag, muttering something under his breath. The deputy said, 10 minutes. My wife spun around. 10? You've used 5. She disappeared back inside. I checked the time on my dashboard. And that's basically how the next 10 minutes went. Door opens, bag comes out, door closes. Door opens, more crap comes out. Shoes, clothes, toiletries, a couple boxes. Ryan finally found a shirt, which was disappointing because his boxer short businessman look was really starting to grow on me. At one point he tried carrying out some equipment from my home office. The deputy stopped him, and after a short argument, the equipment went right back inside. Good. Take your underwear, buddy. Leave my printer. At 14 minutes, my wife was still trying to argue. Some of my things are upstairs. The deputy said, "You were told to collect essential personal belongings. I need more time. Your attorney can arrange lawful recovery of any remaining personal property later." That was the key part. Nobody was stealing their things. Nobody was dumping furniture onto the street. They were being removed from the house under the court order, and anything left behind would get handled properly afterward. I mention that because by this point I had learned one very useful lesson. Do everything through paperwork. It's slower, it's boring, it doesn't make a great action movie, but it keeps you from doing stupid crap that comes back and bites you in the ass. The 15 minutes ran out and the deputy told them it was time. Ryan picked up 2 garbage bags, my wife grabbed her suitcase and purse. She stood at the bottom of the porch steps and looked back at the house, then at me. And for a second, neither one of us moved. 2 months earlier, I'd stood in almost the exact same place holding one suitcase. She'd been inside, Ryan had been behind her, and she'd told me my time was up. Now she was standing outside with her stuff at her feet. Funny how quickly our house becomes private property when somebody finally reads the damn documents. The deputies walked them beyond the gate. One stayed with them, while the other came back toward the house. My attorney got out of his car, and I finally stepped out of my truck. My legs felt weird, not shaky, just weird. After 2 months of being told I couldn't go near the place, walking up that driveway felt almost wrong. The deputy met me near the porch and handed the keys over. "Property is returned to your control." I looked down at them. Same keys, same house. I said, "Thank you." Then I looked toward the curb. My wife and Ryan were standing there with garbage bags and a suitcase. No house, frozen access to the accounts caught up in the case. No control over my company, and a whole pile of legal problems coming straight at them. I didn't say a word, didn't need to. I unlocked my front door and walked inside. And, guys, I'm telling you, after 2 months in that motel, even the smell of my own damn hallway felt expensive. Walking back into that house felt strange as hell. Everything looked familiar. Obviously, same couch, same kitchen, same pictures on the walls. But after 2 months in a motel, my own living room looked like some luxury resort. I dropped my suitcase by the stairs, that same damn suitcase. For a second, I just stood there looking at it. 2 months earlier, she'd rolled it out onto the porch with a couple shirts, socks, and underwear, and basically told me, "Good luck, buddy." Now I carried it back inside myself. I walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and immediately regretted it, because apparently neither one of those two believed in throwing food away. There were takeout containers everywhere, 3 bottles of wine, some weird green juice, and a piece of cheese in the back that looked like it had developed voting rights. I shut the door. Okay, we're cleaning tomorrow. Then I checked the cabinet and saw that my good bourbon was gone. I stood there staring at the empty spot, thinking, "You son of a bitch!" Of everything Ryan had done, that somehow felt personal. Steal my business? Lawyers can fix it. Sleep with my wife? You can keep her. Drink the bourbon I was saving? Now you're just being an asshole. My phone started ringing maybe 20 minutes after I got inside. Her number. I watched it ring, didn't answer. Then again, didn't answer. Then a text. "Please talk to me." Another. "We need to discuss what happened today." What happened today? I laughed. "Lady, you got removed from a house you didn't own. That's what happened today." Then another message came in. Ryan lied to me. There it was. That didn't take long. Then she called again, and I sent it to voicemail. 5 minutes later, another number called that I didn't recognize. I answered because I thought it might be my attorney. "Hello?" Her voice filled the line. "Daniel, please don't hang up." I closed my eyes. "How did you get this number?" "I'm using someone else's phone." "Obviously. Please, just give me 5 minutes." "No." "Daniel, listen to me." "I've listened to you plenty." She started crying. "Ryan told me everything was legal. He said the business paperwork was legal. He said the house would be marital property. He told me the lawyers had everything handled. And suddenly, Ryan had gone from brilliant new partner and great love of her life to some evil mastermind who had apparently hypnotized my poor innocent wife. Amazing. I said, "So Ryan forced you to file that statement too?" Silence. "Did he force you to pack my suitcase?" Nothing. "Did he force you to tell me it was your house and your business?" She said, "I was angry." "Apparently. You don't understand what he was telling me." "Oh, I understand enough. He manipulated me." Guys, I almost admired it. 2 months earlier, she was smiling while I stood in the driveway with one suitcase, and now suddenly, she was a victim too. Everybody was a victim except the guy living beside an ice machine at a motel. She said, "I always loved you." I laughed. Couldn't help it. That's an interesting way of showing it. I'm serious. So am I. She asked me to meet her. "Just coffee, please, 20 minutes. No. 10 minutes? No. Daniel, after all these years, you can't give me 10 minutes. I looked around my house, actually looked around at the living room she'd been celebrating in. at the kitchen where she'd posted her little New Beginnings pictures. Then I looked at my suitcase by the stairs. No, I gave you years. You're not getting 10 more minutes. I hung up, but then another number called, then another. Texts started coming in from numbers I didn't know. Apologies, excuses, please call me. I made a terrible mistake. I didn't know Ryan was doing all of this. We can fix this. That last one was my favorite. We. There was no we. That ship hadn't just sailed. The damn thing was halfway across the Atlantic. I forwarded screenshots to my attorney, and he called me. Stop communicating with her directly. Gladly. If she contacts you about the case, direct her to counsel. Can I direct her to Mars? No. Had to ask. After that, every call went unanswered. My lawyer's office became the only place she was getting a response, and apparently she did not enjoy that arrangement. Good, because I was done listening to crocodile tears. The next morning I started cleaning the house. Not some emotional cleansing ceremony, the place was just a mess. I filled trash bags, threw out old food, changed the sheets, opened windows, and put Ryan's random crap into boxes for the lawyers to deal with. And then I got to the closet. Guys, my wife had left half a department store behind. Dresses, shoes, handbags, coats, and boxes with expensive labels on them. Some of it I'd never even seen. I pulled out one handbag and looked at the name, knowing enough to realize it wasn't cheap. Then another. Shoes still in boxes, a jacket with tags on it. Apparently, while I was drinking motel coffee, somebody had been enjoying a pretty healthy shopping budget. I called my attorney. Question. He immediately said, "What are you planning?" That tells you how well he knew me by then. Relax, I'm not burning anything. Good start. What do I legally do with all her stuff? He explained that I couldn't just toss property that wasn't mine because I was pissed off. There was a process, notice, opportunity to retrieve it, documentation, all the boring adult crap. Fine, so we did it properly. Again, she was formally notified that her remaining personal belongings had to be collected through an arranged process. And because she apparently believed the entire world should still operate around her schedule, she dragged her feet. Excuse after excuse. Couldn't come that day. Needed more time, wanted access to the house herself, wanted to talk first. Nope. Everything went through the lawyers. Eventually, once the required process was handled and the items she failed to collect were legally cleared for disposal, my attorney called, "You can get rid of the remaining property." I looked at the mountain of clothes and boxes. Anything I want? Within the terms we discussed, yes. I smiled. Then I made one phone call. Not to her, but to Goodwill. Because if I had to spend 2 months in a motel while my wife played rich lady in my family home, at least somebody decent was going to get some use out of all those fancy damn handbags. A couple days later, the Goodwill truck pulled up. And guys, I didn't turn it into some big ceremony. No cameras, no Facebook Live, no standing on the porch holding one of her handbags over my head like I'd just won the Super Bowl. I just started carrying boxes out. Dresses, shoes, coats, handbags, all that expensive crap she'd left behind after the legal deadline passed. The driver opened one box, looked inside, and went, "Wow, this is nice stuff." I said, "Yeah." Apparently, I had excellent taste in things I never knew I was buying. He laughed, and we loaded everything, box after box. And I'm not gonna lie, it felt pretty damn good watching that truck drive away. Not because I wanted to hurt her. Okay, maybe 5% because I wanted to hurt her, I'm human, but mostly because I wanted that crap out of my house. Every dress hanging in that closet reminded me of her, every pair of shoes, every stupid expensive purse. I didn't need a museum dedicated to my failed marriage. The charity gave me the donation paperwork, and I sent it straight to my attorney. A few days later, he called me. "You'll enjoy this." "What?" Her attorney asked about the remaining clothes. I smiled. "And?" "I sent the donation documentation." I actually laughed. "How'd that go?" Her attorney did not sound surprised. Poor guy. Imagine having to call your client and say, "Remember all those designer clothes you didn't pick up when you were legally told to? Good news, somebody at Goodwill is about to have the best shopping day of her life." That's when my ex really lost it. More calls from random numbers, more messages. "How could you give away my things?" I didn't respond. What kind of person does that? Still nothing. Then she sent, "Some of those bags cost thousands." Yeah, I knew. I had the bank statements. My attorney handled it, sending her side the records, showing the notices, deadlines, and donation, and that was the end of that argument. And while she was losing her mind over handbags, Ryan had developed a much bigger problem. Remember all those business documents? The signatures I said weren't mine? The account changes, the money movements. Well, those didn't magically disappear because he'd been kicked out of my house. The investigation kept moving, and apparently Mr. Big Businessman finally realized this wasn't some little civil disagreement where he'd write a check and go play golf. There were serious fraud allegations hanging over him. The accounts connected to the mess were frozen. My lawyers were tearing apart everything he'd touched inside the company. Employees were giving statements, emails were being reviewed, and suddenly, Ryan became very difficult to find. Funny timing. One day my business attorney called. "Have you heard from Ryan?" "No." "Why?" "His counsel says he's no longer at his listed residence." I leaned back. "You mean the residence he never owned?" "Different address." "Oh, still funny." Apparently he'd packed up and left town. Not some international manhunt crap. He just disappeared from his normal routine and started trying to stay out of sight while his attorney dealt with the mess. And my ex? He left her behind. That great romance she'd blown up 25 years of marriage for? Gone. She called me again from another number, and this time I made the mistake of answering. "Daniel." I knew immediately she'd been crying. I said, "What?" "Ryan left." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Okay. That's all you're gonna say?" "What do you want me to say?" "He just left me here with everything." I almost laughed at the wording. Everything. By everything, she meant lawyers, frozen money, no house, no boyfriend, and a divorce she'd helped turn into a dumpster fire. I said, "Sounds like Ryan." She went quiet, then she said, "I ruined my life." Now that was probably the first honest thing she'd said to me in months, but I didn't celebrate, didn't say, "Told you so." Didn't need to. I just said, "You need to talk to your lawyer." "Daniel, please." "No, I have nowhere to go." "Talk to your lawyer." "I loved you." I closed my eyes. Guys, at some point, words just stop meaning anything. You can say "I love you" 1,000 times, but it doesn't erase the night you stood behind 2 police officers while your husband got kicked out with 1 suitcase. It doesn't erase fake paperwork, doesn't erase helping another man take his company, doesn't erase sitting in an $850,000 house posting pictures about your new beginning. So I said, "Don't call me again." Then I hung up. After that, things finally started moving in the right direction for me. The court process around the company took time, but every week we cleaned up another piece of Ryan's mess. Fraudulent documents were challenged and thrown out, unauthorized control was reversed, bank access got sorted properly, clients were contacted, and employees were told I was back. The first morning I walked into my office again was almost as weird as walking back into the house. People stopped what they were doing. One of my longtime employees came over and shook my hand. "Good to have you back, boss." I said, "Good to be somewhere with coffee that doesn't come from a motel." A couple people laughed, and that was exactly what I needed. No big speech, no applause, just work. My desk was still there, my chair, family photo, coffee mug. Ryan had moved some things around which pissed me off more than it should have, so I put everything back where I liked it. Then I sat down. My company. Again. Over the next several weeks, the false paperwork connected to the takeover was unwound, my control was fully restored, and the fraud case against the people involved kept moving through the legal system. I had the business back, I had the family house back, and for the first time in months I could go to sleep without wondering what those two were stealing while I wasn't looking. One evening I got home around 6, walked through the kitchen, opened the back door, and looked at the grill. I'd barely used the thing through all this crap. So I went inside, grabbed my keys, and drove to the grocery store. 2 steaks, a bag of potatoes, and beer. Because after months of lawyers, motel coffee, court papers, fake accusations, and one idiot business partner, I finally had a free evening, and I planned to use it properly. That evening was the first time in months my life felt normal again. No lawyer sitting across from me, No court papers, no motel room, and no unknown number lighting up my phone every 10 minutes. Just me standing on the back porch with a pair of tongs, watching 2 steaks sizzle on the grill. I had a few beers sitting in a little bucket of ice next to my chair on that warm evening. It was a quiet backyard with that smell of charcoal and meat in the air. Simple stuff. And guys, after the year I'd had, simple felt pretty damn luxurious. I sat down, opened a beer, and looked at the house. My grandfather had built that place 30 years earlier, and I'd spent years living there without thinking much about it. You get used to things. The porch becomes just a porch, the kitchen becomes just a kitchen, and you complain about the gutters, the property taxes, or the damn air conditioner making some weird noise every summer. Then somebody throws you out. Suddenly you understand exactly what home means. And the funny part was, the one thing my wife and Ryan had treated like the easiest piece of the whole scam was the thing they never actually bothered to check: the house. They'd checked the business accounts, worked on paperwork, and planned how to push me out. My wife had even packed the damn suitcase ahead of time, but neither one of those geniuses had apparently thought, hey, before we start celebrating in this $850,000 house, maybe we should find out who legally owns it. Nope. Too boring. Much more fun to open wine and post pictures about new beginnings. My old friend Mike came through the side gate while I was checking the stakes. He'd known me for years and had watched this whole mess from the outside. He held up a 6-pack. I brought backup. I pointed at the bucket. Already prepared. He looked inside. That's not enough. Now I remember why we're friends. He grabbed a chair and sat down. For a while we didn't even talk about the divorce. Football, work, his truck making some stupid noise, just normal guy crap. And honestly, that was exactly what I wanted. Then he looked toward the house, shook his head and said, "Man." "What?" "You really went through some crap." "That's one way to put it." He took a drink. "Your wife gets you thrown out. That asshole tries taking your company. You spend 2 months in a motel. Then you come all the way back and kick both of them out. I flipped 1 steak. Technically, the sheriff kicked them out. You know what I mean?" "Yeah." He laughed, then he added, "That's gotta mess with your head, though. Losing everything like that and fighting to get it all back. Hell of a tragedy." I looked at him, then at the house, then down at my beer, and I said, "Nah, brother." He raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Tragedy would have been spending another 10 years living with rats under my roof and calling them family." He went quiet. I took a drink. The house came back. Business came back. Money can be fixed. Reputation can be fixed. I pointed toward the back door. "But finding out who was sitting at my table? That's useful information." Mike laughed. "Useful information?" "Hell yes. Expensive information, but useful." He shook his head. "You're a weird bastard." I spent 2 months drinking motel coffee. It changes a man. That got him laughing. I pulled the steaks off the grill and let them rest. And sitting there, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. Did I forgive them? Nope. Let's not get stupid. I wasn't sending Christmas cards. But I also wasn't waking up every morning thinking about Ryan or my ex. They had their problems now. The fraud investigation was still moving, the business mess was being cleaned up, and my ex had her lawyers and whatever life she was putting together after all this. Ryan had run off the second things got serious, which told me pretty much everything I knew about his great love story. And me? I had work Monday morning, my own bed upstairs, a steak in front of me, and a cold beer. That was enough. Mike cut into his steak and said, "Damn, that's good." "I know. Little overcooked. Get out of my house." He laughed, so I pointed the knife at him. "Seriously, I've gotten very good at removing unwanted people from this property." Okay. Perfect steak. That's better." We sat there until it got dark. And that's pretty much where this story ends, guys. Not in a courtroom, not with somebody getting dragged away while I stand there laughing. Real life usually doesn't wrap itself up that neatly. There were still legal proceedings, still documents, and still lawyers making more money every time somebody opened an email. But the important stuff was already back where it belonged. My company was under my control again, the fake business paperwork had been knocked down, and my family home was mine to control under the trust. The people who'd been so damn confident they could take everything from me were now dealing with the consequences of what they'd done. My wife thought throwing me out with one suitcase meant she'd won, and Ryan thought getting his hands on the company meant he was some kind of business genius. All they really did was give my lawyers a very organized list of crap to fix. And thank God, my grandparents had been smarter about paperwork than I was about people. That's the part I still laugh about. Grandpa built the house, Grandma protected it, and 30 years later, those boring old trust documents saved my ass because two greedy idiots were too busy counting money to read them. So if there's anything I learned from this whole mess, it's pretty simple. Fight for what's yours, don't lose your damn head when somebody screws you over, and get a good lawyer before you get a baseball bat. Paperwork isn't exciting, and nobody makes action movies about certified copies and property trusts. But I'll tell you what, watching a sheriff hand you the keys to your own house while the people who tried to steal it are standing by the curb with garbage bags, that's pretty damn satisfying. I took another drink of beer and looked over at Mike. He said, "So what now?" I shrugged. "Work, grill, maybe take a vacation." "No new wife?" I looked at him. "Man, let me enjoy the house for 5 damn minutes." He nearly choked on his beer, and I laughed, because life after cleaning the traitors out of it, turns out it's a pretty damn good thing.